When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth, where we're exploring all sorts of business topics. Experts from around the world join me, your host, Diane Helbig, for a conversation where they share their expertise with all of you. Take what you need when you need it. Featured on Inc.com, Forbes, and MSNBC's Your Business, this podcast is recognized as one of the best podcasts for small business, sales, leadership, social media, and more. When it comes to business, Accelerate Your Business Growth has got it covered. And now on with the show. My guest today is Julie Halunga. Julie is a leadership advisor developing professionals to amplify their influence and impact. She works with teams and leaders to instill her trusted voice paradigm to increase effective communications, make conflict constructive, and develop leaders who lead with integrity. Her expertise lies within professional services, law, accounting, and investment firms, specializing in the careers of female leaders. Thanks so much for being here today, Julie.
Thank you, Diane. I'm excited for our conversation.
I am too. We're going to be really focusing on, leadership and we're going to talk some about conflict, but I am curious what you are seeing as, like the biggest mistake leaders make with their teams.
Sure. The biggest mistake I see far too often is that they sweep conflict under the rug, right? They don't want to deal with it. They don't know how to deal with it because none of us have gone to undergrad or grad and taken a class on conflict, like Conflict 101. I think that would be a great idea to add to graduate school. But I see that they don't want to address it, or they think perhaps that they are addressing it, but it continues. So to me, that means that they're not addressing it as fully as they need to or in the right way.
Yeah, I am so with you on that. So, okay, so let's talk about conflict. I mean, I'm not even sure where to begin on that, but what do you think causes conflict in the workplace?
Well, what I see oftentimes is that there is a misunderstanding or a miscommunication of some kind that escalates because we don't address it, right? And a misunderstanding can start off as, I'm going to get this to you by the end of the day or the end of the week. And in my mind, that's Friday at 11:59 p.m. But Diane, to you, maybe that means Friday by 4. And so it's a misunderstanding. But if we don't address it, if we don't talk about, hey, I was expecting it at 4, it escalates. And then there's a miscommunication of some kind. And it continues to escalate until it becomes polarizing in some way where we can't come back from it. And I see that there are some things, I call it like just before that polarization state where people leave, clients maybe fire us, where we no longer can continue as is. Like we're splitting our relationship in some capacity. There is this level, I like to call it discord, where we can notice those red flags before we get to that polarization state. So oftentimes when we're in that discord state, what I hear is, for instance, I disappoint you, Diane, in some way, or I don't do what I say I'm going to do, or
Mm.
I've done something that annoys you or angers you, but you don't bring it up to me, because a lot of us don't want to address that conflict or don't want to have that hard conversation. And when we're in discord, the way that I know we're in discord is you may bring that up in a meeting. So let's say I disappoint you in some way and I don't do as I say I'm going to do. And then we're sitting in a meeting together and you say, well, Julie, you know how she is. She says she's going to do that, but she probably won't. So you say you're over it, but you're bringing it up again in some capacity. It is, in case you were wondering, it is a little passive aggressive. So, right? No, I'm fine. But we know how Julie is. She's not going to show up, or something like that. And so, if you can pay attention and hear and those things and see those behaviors happen, and then address that conflict, you can de-escalate it and not get to that point of polarization where you lose employees or you lose customers or clients.
You know what I find so interesting, and I was laughing because, boy, it just sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
And what I find so interesting is that people don't realize that we're actually creating a bigger problem.
Absolutely.
Right? By not
Yes.
just having that, quote, difficult conversation at the beginning or setting the expectation at the beginning.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I see happen, is that I often will have clients, this happens at least once a week, typically Monday morning, but not always. I need to speak to you before 11 o'clock today. And, and typically it's because there has been some misunderstanding and they don't know what to do about it, but they don't want to have the conversation. And I have had clients ask me to go have the hard conversation, and the answer is always no. But I will help them figure out how they start that conversation, because what happens if they don't have the conversation, it's just an avalanche and things get worse and worse and worse. And then there is going to be a conversation that has to happen at a certain point, and it's going to be way harder, way more awkward than if we had that first awkward conversation or hard conversation.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, Diane, as I'm saying this to you, I'm realizing that there's a hard conversation I need to have and I don't want to do it. So I just realized that. But though I try to practice what I preach. But even I, who, I research this, I talk about this day in and day out, I still struggle with it, not with not knowing what to do, but not wanting to do it. It's human nature.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
want to upset someone. We don't want to
Exactly.
be, conflict conversation, have someone be mad at us, whatever it is. So I get it. And I don't think any of us like to have them. Having said that, I think we have to decide to what degree, what are the ones we really don't want to have, and then can we have the smaller ones?
Right.
Then it won't get there.
Right. Or at least start with that. And then you become more comfortable when those conversations, even if they are awkward,
Yep.
they may improve a relationship or improve something, a situation of some kind. That you have that like a little small win. You're like, okay, I can do this. I can have this conversation.
Right.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel like a lot of it has to do with how you start the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
If you start it with, I don't want this to be uncomfortable for either of us.
Right.
You're naming the elephant in the room.
Exactly. And Diane, I actually would start with something even before that. That's a great piece. And I completely agree that, you got to address what we know everyone's feeling, but to start the conversation with, as long as it's genuine, don't fake it, but I'm invested in you, or we need you.
Yeah.
Something, or this friendship matters to me.
Yeah.
Because there's a study that was done with Stanford and Yale showing that in giving feedback, which is a hard conversation, type of hard conversation, when you're able to share those two things, one, that I believe in you, or I want this to work, and the other, that I your belief in them to make a change
Yeah.
or to change a behavior or the way they complete a task. That doing those two things vastly improves the likely outcome of a change in behavior.
That's interesting. That makes
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah. And also there's the reality of when we don't address something when we need to, it becomes harder to say, I believe in you, or I know you can do this.
Ah,
Like if we let it linger a little bit, our
yeah.
trust in others and their trust in us, right? If I come to you, Diane, and I say, hey, 6 months ago, you really pissed me off.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me, if I receive that,
Yeah.
that to me, be like, why are you waiting? And why am I going to trust anything that comes out of your mouth next?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. That's
Yeah.
so interesting. And I wanted to talk about trust because, what you just said made me think about it's the reason why I don't like annual reviews. I think they're ridiculous, right?
Right.
Gee, thanks for not
Right.
helping me solve this problem.
Right.
So you're not giving me a raise, whatever. But so it does feel like all of this is wrapped around trust, that I have to trust you, you have to trust me, that we have to have that foundation of trust. And so I guess my question is, do you think that if there is that original foundation of trust, these conversations are easier?
Yes, they're still hard, but they're
Okay.
easier. But if that trust has eroded, it's not that you can't come back from it,
Yeah.
but it's a lot more work, a lot more effort, a lot more thought and time put into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you bring up performance reviews because we're at that time of year, right? That people tend to be having them. And the complaints I always hear is, why are they telling me this now? Why didn't they tell me this? Yeah. And I think that's a real mistake. And I'm seeing a shift. I'm seeing a lot more organizations across industries trying to bring feedback as part of their culture with an effort to minimize, distrusts.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And that feedback, I know when I'm advising an organization, what I say, you have to establish feedback loops where
Yes,
your staff feels comfortable coming to you with feedback.
exactly.
Right? In the moment. It's not just you giving it to them all the time.
That's
You
right.
need to be able to hear it as
Yes.
well. Yeah.
Yes. And if there was one thing that I would want your listeners to consider a shift is that feedback tends to go downhill. And downhill meaning in terms of we give our direct reports feedback.
Yeah.
And that might be hard still, but that seems to be normal, quote unquote.
Sure.
What I really want companies to shift, and there are a lot doing it, but it's not pervasive yet, is to have regular feedback going both ways so that even the most senior leaders are open, truly open, not just saying one thing, right? Like saying something, but their actions and behaviors say something else.
Yeah.
But really having that. And I work with a lot of firms who are really good with giving feedback to associates and junior partners, but haven't figured out how to do it peer to peer. And so people may go 20 years without getting any feedback.
Wow.
And so then if you start with someone who's in their 50s, let's say, and giving them feedback for the first time in decades, they're not going to be so open to it.
Nope.
And I don't blame them for that.
I don't either.
Yeah.
And then you've created your own problem,
Exactly.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. So I want to sort of flip this on you.
Yes.
Because you say, conflict is a necessity, and you got to explain to the listeners.
Yes. Yes. I was hoping you would bring that up because I was just having the same thought. So the reason I say that conflict is a necessity, we need differing opinions to be able to make progress, whether it's the way we do work, whether it's a service or a product that we deliver, we can't be surrounded by yes men and expect to do things different. Our world is constantly changing. It always has, right? We're never stuck in one place. Okay, we're good. And in fact, there are a lot of companies in the tech space who do this well. And there are some products, for instance, out of Google, that they spend a certain percentage per month of their time, what they call innovation days. And it's an amount of time that you block on your calendar as a Google employee where you get to be creative and think of whether it's improvement on a product or a whole new product. And what I've read is that, for instance, Google Calendar came out of that practice.
Huh.
So I like to imagine what goes on in the halls. I have worked with Google here in Boulder, in Colorado, a little bit. But what I imagine goes on is someone came and said, "Hey, I have this idea," and then that person got pushed back for sure. It's not going to work. That'll never happen. No one wants to use it. That's healthy conflict and constructive. And when it's constructive, it's not saying, "Diane, your idea is dumb. It's not going to happen." But instead, it's saying, who's going to use this product or this service? And how are we going to get it out there? So you're focusing not on the individual who has the idea, but instead on the task at hand.
Yeah.
That's constructive conflict, because then you're able to build on ideas and come up with perspectives that if I'm sitting at my desk dreaming up an idea, it's not going to be as good as it is if I bring some others in and you bring in that element of collaboration. Then we have constructive conflict. And that's the kind of conflict that I say is a necessity.
Okay, great. I'm so glad I asked the question. And
Yes.
I mean, that's how change happens, right? Progress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't, you have to be innovative.
Right. Otherwise you die. Right?
Yeah.
Your organization won't exist in a decade.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, how do I want to ask this question? Can you share some like tangible benefits that you've seen teams experience when they actually prioritize a culture of trust?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Great question. What I see is that they are happier, they're more engaged, that if there is conflict or there's a disagreement of sorts, they deal with it, they get over it, they move past it, and they keep going. So, there's so much focus on performance and productivity. And a few years ago, stopped talking about high performing or highly productive teams and started talking about high value teams. So if you are in a product or service industry and you're thinking about, how do I continue to grow? How do I continue to deliver to my customers, for instance? You're not wasting time in conflict because you have this high level of trust and you're constantly thinking about, how do I keep that level of trust? So I see happier, healthier, and high value teams because they're having those hard conversations, even if they are hard. And they're thinking about trust, not just between two people, but they're thinking about trust at the leadership level, whether that's a leadership of a team or, your leadership team C-suite. And they're thinking about trust within a team and across teams. And then they're thinking about trust from an organization-wide level. So it's talent, leaders, teams, and organization. And if you're not constantly thinking about, I always think of this as like a DNA strand, it's constantly overlapping and changing and shifting. But if you think about it from those 4 elements, you will spend less time in the personnel and the issues and the yucky stuff that we're avoiding, and more time in the innovation and growth and adding value to each other internally and to your customers or clients externally.
As you were talking about that, I was thinking, it seems to me that when you are in that mindset, when everyone's in that mindset, the communication is better, more frequent,
Yes.
more meaningful, right? Because I was
Yes.
when you were talking about it, I was thinking, boy, so many organizations are siloed. Like the different departments don't talk to each other and they don't know what each other's doing, and then they get mad at each other and whatnot.
That's right.
Right. But what you're
Yep.
talking about creates an environment where you are eager to discover and have those conversations and share and collaborate and things like that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And it makes a huge difference to the happiness of your employees.
Yeah.
Right. And if they're happy, they're more engaged. If they're more engaged, they're adding more value. If there's more value that's being added, you're growing. So it really does. It comes down to that bottom line.
Yeah.
And the sustainability of it. Right. I was with a client yesterday and they were growing like gangbusters and that stopped over the course of about 18 months. And it's not decreasing, but it's plateaued. And they realized a lot of the things that were going wrong. And one of them was exactly what you just said, Diane, like not sharing information, not seeing opportunities cross-functionally, not trusting each other to have the best interest of the organization. And
Right.
Yeah, it makes a
Right.
huge difference.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kidding.
Yes.
And shoot, I just had a thought. It's totally left my head. I hate it.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah. Thank you. I know what it was. That the funny thing is that some people feel like they can't talk about the bottom line as a reason for whatever, fill in the blank. But everything points back to the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not a bad
Yes.
thing. It should be a motivator.
And it doesn't need to be, I was leading a conversation last night of some female leaders talking about generational differences. And one of the things that came up was motivators. And in different generations, there are different motivators.
Yeah.
We all still want to get paid. We wouldn't be working if we didn't want to,
Right.
be able to live and put food on the table. So different generations, Gen X is driven more by money than maybe other generations. And I know that I'm, sort of spreading this wide,
Sure.
definition there, but we all want to keep the lights on. And so it does affect us. And as employees, don't we want to be in a place where we are connected to what we're doing? We feel valued. We feel that we're adding value and that we're able to make a living without driving ourselves crazy and able to also live life. So all of these things are allowing us to do that.
Yeah. And, the older I get, the less I think that there really is a huge difference. I think, no matter the generation, people have always wanted to feel like they were contributing to something.
Yeah.
It just wasn't something that was talked about before because it wasn't the societal norm.
Right. Right.
But you could tell by the way people acted. If they didn't feel like they were contributing because they weren't being communicated with that way, then their contribution went down.
Yeah.
So somewhere in there, it's always been there. It's just these younger generations are saying it out loud.
Yeah. And I love that. And I love how they're talking about it and it's helping us shift.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's such a, when people complain to me about, well, I think now we're done complaining about millennials. Now,
gosh, I hope so.
Yeah. Geez. Now we're complaining about the Gen Zers, and
of course,
right. And I always find that interesting. But you're absolutely right. Everyone, like, who wouldn't want to be? Everyone wants to be part of a team that's cohesive and they're aligned. They're rowing in the same direction and they're adding value. I mean, I've never met in all my years of doing this leadership work, met anyone who said, nah, that doesn't sound so appealing. I don't want to do that.
I could do without it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, wow, it'd be interesting to talk to like a sociologist about that, because
Mhm.
I think that's part of the human animal. That
Absolutely.
right, that this is just part of us being the sort of animal that we are, and that was just being ignored all those years, that there was this line between
Yeah.
work and human.
Right.
you
Right.
know?
And that's one of the things I talk about in terms of trust. One of the strategies I suggest to people, you're asking for practical tools to build trust or
Yeah.
to rebuild trust even,
Yeah.
is to this piece of humanity, like be genuine.
Yeah.
Genuinely show that you care about someone. And if you don't, like I said before, don't say that you do.
Right.
Because people will read right through it and it's going to have a negative impact. It's not going to
Yeah.
help you in any way.
Yeah, for sure. We can all see right through it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Julie, I've so enjoyed this conversation.
Me too, Diane.
I'm so glad. This is so valuable. Will you tell the listeners how they can find you, please?
Sure. So my website is juliehalunga.com. And I have a lot of resources on there, including more about the trusted voice paradigm, which I talked about how to build trust more in your organization and with your teams and leaders. And you can find my TED Talk on YouTube or TED.com as well. And all of that's on my website as well.
Awesome. So great. We'll make sure that's in the show notes. Thank you again. And listeners, thank you. You are who we're doing this for.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, a production of Evergreen Podcasts. Discover more episodes of this podcast and explore others at evergreenpodcast.com. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And if you're looking to get your sales strategy headed in the right direction, pick up a copy of Succeed Without Selling on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Do you love news about LinkedIn, Indeed, Google, and just about every other recruitment tech company out there?
Hell yeah. I'm Chad.
I'm Cheese.
We're the Chad and Cheese Podcast.
All the latest recruiting news and insights are on our show.
Dripping in snark and attitude.
Subscribe today wherever you listen to your podcasts.
We out.